Welcome everyone to our final session of Fast Track, and this year this is a new type of session, one in topic. It's the financing scientific pursuits and then goals, but this is really open. It's meant to be a discussion session in the vein of a fireside chat, so we're gonna kind of operate the logistics a little bit differently. I'm going to introduce you to our panel first, and then I'm going to have a seat and ask them an intro question. But after that, then it's really up to you guys to drive what you want to know and what you want to hear about from their experience perspective. Okay, so these are our panelists, Paloma, Abe, Jimmy, and Cynthia, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about each of them so you can get an idea of why they're on the panel and what their perspective is as they are addressing your questions. So Paloma is a tenured professor in the Department of Ophthalmology, Departments of Ophthalmology and Pathology at Duke University. She also did her postdoc there with Dave Epstein, who you heard about in today's keynote speaker, from our today's keynote speaker. She has received funding from NIH, Alcon, Glaucoma Research Foundation, BrightFocus for her work, yay, on autophagy and outflow pathway physiology and neurodegeneration in glaucoma. She's received several awards, including the Alcon Research Institute Young Investigator Award and the Thomas R. Lee Glaucoma Research Award. She serves on multiple editorial boards, but notably is the executive editor for experimental eye research. I'm sure she'd be happy to talk about the journal as well at some point during the meeting. She is a reviewer for the National Eye Institute, BrightFocus Foundation, where she's a member of the Glaucoma Scientific Review Committee, as well as other international study sections. She's also serving as the Vice President of the Americas for the International Society for Eye Research, and was on the organizing committee and co-chair of the Travel Awards Committee for this meeting. No. Paloma does not sleep. And then we have Abe, who you've also seen today and was on the organizing committee for this year's Fast Track. He's a Regents Professor of Pharmacology and Neuroscience at the University of North Texas Health Sciences Center in Fort Worth. He was the founding director of the North Texas Eye Research Institute. His academic laboratory has been continuously funded by grants from the NEI, NIH, DoD, foundations, as well as industry for 17 years. But prior to opening his academic laboratory at the University of North Texas, he was a scientist for 23 years at Alcon Laboratories, and when he left Alcon, he was the Vice President of Discovery Research and Head of Glaucoma Research. So while at Alcon, this is notable for funding strategies, he actually was responsible for funding numerous academic research labs. And so he has a unique experience, not only in obtaining grants as an academic researcher, but also in actually providing support from an industry entity to academic research programs. Oh, there we go. We're out of order. It's okay. There, on the end of the table, we have Jimmy, who spent 8 years at the National Eye Institute doing his PhD and postdoctoral research. He then transitioned, still at the NIH, to manage training grants for neuroscience trainees at the National Institute for Neurological Disorders and Stroke, and is now the new director of vision science programs at the BrightFocus Foundation. Yay! Congratulations on your new position. And then we have Cynthia Steel, who received her PhD in cell biology in 2010 and completed a postdoc, but then left academia to pursue a career in industry. And so she rose through the ranks in industry like Bausch & Lomb, Claris Bio, and Glaukos. And she holds it now both a PhD and an MBA. And so collectively, she has about 2 decades of experience in glaucoma therapeutic space in industry. but she also has a new job, like Jimmy. She is now the Chief Scientific Officer at the Glaucoma Research Foundation, and is also a strategic advisor for the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health, or ARPA-H. And so the idea today is that you utilize, as we've talked about elsewhere in Fast Track, utilize the expertise that's in front of you to ask questions. And while this is a financing scientific pursuits session, you'd be kind of remiss to allow the opportunity to pass to ask any burning career type questions you may have of this panel, as we have a diverse representation. So I'm going to state our learning objectives. So you should hopefully by the end of this be able to recognize opportunities for funding research from various sources, not just federal, and understand things that you may need to consider when you're trying to select a potential funding source, as well as to evaluate differing paths of research careers and the funding that supports them. And then hopefully by the end, you'll be thinking about potential strategies to advance the next steps in your own research career. And so with that, I'm gonna transition over to my fireside seat. There we go.
I wish that fire was real.
I know, right? Seriously.
Right?
So cool.
It is a digital, but you know, what can I do? There are codes here. There are codes here, Brad. Okay, so I'm gonna ask the first question to get us started, and hopefully that is the last question I need to ask this session. But you know, we'll see, I guess. So I'm gonna ask each of them to answer this first question, and the goal of this question is really to help you get to know them a little bit better, for those of you who don't know them, and for them to be able to share kind of what motivates them in their research career. So the question is, are you ready, panel? What was the first career step you took after completion of training? And you can pick graduate or postdoc training, whichever you think is most important. And what was the most important factor for you in making the decision to take that step? So we can go down the line, or someone can answer right away if they want. Abe, are you up? All right.
I should have sat down there, I guess.
You should have.
When I finished my postdoc, I stayed in academia for a couple of years as an instructor. But then I was given an opportunity to I was invited to Alcon Labs to tell them a little bit about steroids and steroid receptors, because I was looking at steroids in muscle metabolism. And at the end of the talk, the vice president comes up and says, "How would you like a job?" And you know, I was starting a family, doubled my salary, all these cool toys in the lab that I could never have afforded from an academic standpoint. So I decided to do that for a couple years just to see what it was like. 23 years later, yeah. So, and I was very fortunate to be doing science at that company. They really supported me, and I left because I was just getting further and further away from the science, and I really wanted to get back in touch and train a future generation of scientists. So those were two important decisions, one to make me go into industry, and then the other one to leave.
Yeah, so I think in my case also two important decisions. I got my PhD in Spain in virology. So one of the most important decisions was to move to the US and change topics. So I entered into the ophthalmology without knowing what an eye was, and especially the trabecular meshwork. It was, I don't know what is trabecular meshwork. So that was occurred by serendipity, and I think it was a very good decision that brought me to the other one. So I was at the Eye Center for 4 years as a postdoc, and then I was very fortunate that I was at the right moment, the right place, and I have chair that supported internal promotions and supported a young generation. So after 4 years as a postdoc, I was offered to stay in the department as a faculty member, and there was this issue of whether it is okay to stay in your department in which you have been trained or not. I thought that it was a good decision. The opportunities that the Eye Center offered me were tremendous for my career, and I stayed there 22 years, so I'm still there, so I think it was a good decision.
I think I might follow on the path of saying there's two, but really for me the biggest one I would say is I made a friend. I did something I was a little shy to do at the time, which is I was at the Trabecular Meshwork Study Club. I know we have some members in the room, and I just said hi to the person sitting across the table from me at breakfast. We were both on our phones, not paying attention at all to each other, and I think I decided to make a joke about New Jersey because that's where he lived, and that broke the ice enough that we started talking, and turns out he was the head of clinical development at Bausch & Lomb, and later that day they started talking about this new drug that they were trying to get through the FDA approval process called Vyzulta, which had a lot of very close parallels to the work that I had been doing as a postdoc. And so about a month or so later, I just happened to be on the Careers at Bausch & Lomb website, and I saw ads for something called a medical science liaison. Well, I think I've heard of that. So I reached out to my new friend and said, what is this? What are you guys looking for? And he said, you know what, I'm gonna put you in touch with a couple of my friends. And actually, by the time my application actually got to the hiring manager, I already had a couple of letters recommending me for the role. And it's all because I made a joke about New Jersey. But I think the second thing that I would say is just that, I don't know, I like learning new things. I like new opportunities. I always get excited with something new and different. And so I think the culmination of a lot of that experience that I've had over the last 10 plus years in industry has gotten me to this new role that I've only been in for about 6 weeks at GRF. So yeah, that would be it.
Okay, so I have 2 inflection points. The first one was how I got into the eye field. So almost like Paloma, it was just on a whim. So I graduated with a chemical engineering degree, and I decided to move away from the field because I took a couple of biology courses during that time and during my undergraduate, and I fell in love with biology and honestly what the impact of all basic and translational research can do to patient health. And so I decided to do a post-bac at the NIH, and just coincidentally, I got accepted into a position at the NEI. And so that eventually, from 1 year, because usually post-bacs are usually 1-ish years, turned into 8 years. I eventually did my post-bac, I did my grad school and my postdoc at the NEI. And then the second inflection point was after I graduated and did a short postdoc, I was deciding what I wanted to do since I decided I didn't want to stay on the academic route. And so I actually tried a lot of different things. I interned at a tech transfer office. I talked to a lot of people in industry. And then the one thing that really flipped to what my career path is today in research administration is the NIH has an NIH career symposium, and program officers at the NIH were there to talk about their career. And when I heard about it, and so essentially program officers, they help manage grants, they help champion the science, they're in the science. And when I heard about the description of what they do, I was like, wow, this is exactly what I want to do going forward with my career. So I was lucky enough to get a position at NINDS in the training office, their diversity training office. And so, yeah, and then I was fortunate enough to land on my feet at BrightFocus, so.
Perfect, excellent. Okay, all right. Does anybody have a question? Oh, Colleen.
So this question's for Abe. So given the current situation with our federal government and NIH, one of the directives that we've been given from UW-Madison is to try to sort of redefine our research programs where we can get money from other sources like industry partners. So what would be your advice on A, how do I identify an industry partner that would want to work with me? And how would I make it beneficial to my research program so that I'm not just doing work for a company?
A great question, and I really empathize with everyone that's going through this process. I mean, this is an unprecedented time to get research support. I would strongly suggest that you try to identify those that are representing industry. So how many representatives do we have right here? 1, 2, 3. Well, stand up so you can be attacked during social hour.
Very important.
Thank you, sponsor.
There's like 5 for anybody.
You know, there'll be more later on in the program starting tomorrow. And get to know them, get to know what kinds of research they want. As far as just being a pair of hands to promote there, at least when I was at Alcon, I used the opportunity of getting really bright folks to work on problems that I didn't have the internal resources to do, because frankly, we could do it a lot cheaper in academic than we could internally. And the things you have to be cautious about is you want to publish, right? And so almost all the contracts actually have a window where they can review the research and file any relevant patents before it's disclosed publicly, because once it's disclosed publicly, it's no longer intellectual property. So that's one. A lot of times, if you're using a new model, they'll have a gold standard that they're trying to compare their compound against. So you can publish that gold standard and how it, if they don't want to release their data. The second is be careful about putting graduate students or postdocs on unless you can publish, because that's what they need for their future career. So you really need to be thinking of, if they're working on the project, that. I've had projects where I've had my associate work on it, that it doesn't matter if they get research publications, right? And a lot of times they start small. So I used to like to break the contracts into steps to see how they performed. So it's really important that if you're going to do that is overperform in the first step, so that they're willing to then provide additional funding.
Thank you.
I'd say that's a general good piece of advice. Just overperform in the first step for anything, right?
Yeah.
Oh, we have another.
It's coming.
Thank you. So with all the scientific research and then research experiments, so we all face rejections and failures. And so I wonder what the panel can give some advice with your career. So how do we handle those things better?
How do you handle
I do
it,
not
first of all?
handle.
Do you handle it? It's the question.
I mean, many times those rejection letters also it's very constructive. So how do I think most people here in the room are very constructive, about what to do with the revisions. But then sometimes you did the revision, yes. So sometimes it may not be. Should you jump out or kind of want to see on the big picture how, these things really help move the career ahead?
Yeah, so I don't handle very well the reviews. I still, after all these years, so when I get a rejection in the manuscript, in a grant, the first thing I do is I write everything I want to write, and then I relax myself. And then after that, after a couple of days, a week, is when I start to see things a little more objectively without this anger. So I take it personal. And I try to look at it for I mean, we are all humans, right? Yeah. So, and then is when you start to look at the critiques. There are some of the critiques that do not make sense, and then you have to move. You know, this don't make sense. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this type of responses. And then there are other ones that make a lot of sense and indeed improve your program. So you have to look at all this criticism with an open mind and be able to learn from them. I have other criticisms that I have one grant, for example, from a reviewer, and all the points, I could not review the grant because I could not understand English, which it was very hurtful to read that. And I approached NIH because I don't think this is an answer that can be acceptable by a reviewer. So you have also the options when you feel that this is not appropriate, especially when other reviewers said your grant is very well written. So there is an inconsistency. So there are some cases. These are just very, very weird cases. Sometimes you see it, people have not read the manuscript properly. The information is there, the details are there. Well, you just write it again, you apologize, you always have to apologize. I apologize that I make it clear, you know, you are very respectful, and then just move on. But especially give more importance to the critiques in which you can grow and you can become a better scientist.
I would agree with that. And as someone who was told about 15 years ago that my research application was written in a very dry style, I can assure you that I don't hold any grudges at all to that person. I don't remember that for one day. No, I 100% agree with Paloma. You know, my mentor used to say, I mean, that's the norm. You know, getting your stuff turned down is the norm. And in fact, I'm going to point out that the folks here on the panel who have managed to reach tenure, I mean, you guys are the exception. You know, the folks in this room that managed to reach that level of tenured professorship, that's getting rarer and rarer. And so, you know, to think about it from, you know, the industry folks, they always say that those are the alternative careers in science, and I don't think that's true anymore. I think you guys are the alternative, and I think that's amazing. But learning to roll with it, learning from all of it, and this goes for job interviews too, by the way. This goes for any sort of rejection. You know, you get through multiple layers of interviews, and the job market's difficult out there right now too, and you get to the last level, it's down to you and one other person, and then you get turned down. You know, I mean, it's always going to hurt, but the best thing you can do is to ask for some feedback, try to learn from it, and after you write your response, and you send it to yourself, and maybe, you know, light it on fire if that's how you feel. Eat some ice cream, have some macaroni and cheese, get a couple good nights sleep, and then try to come back stronger the next time. That's just persistence.
I think you just have to get a mindset that most of the time you're going to be facing rejection, and I absolutely agree. And I still get upset, right? So the first time I read through the reviewer comments, it's only natural to have that feeling, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. But as you say, you learn from it. I also would exercise extensively to get rid of that angst that was building up in me. I used to have a body bag in the backyard. I could go and.
Love it.
I can't do that anymore.
Body bag. Maybe a heavy bag.
No, any of you that have worked out in a gym, you know, it's body bag, a punching bag. It's a heavy punching bag. But in order to succeed through that, you have to absolutely be polite and recognize that, you know, they're trying to do their best in their review. And you'll get an occasional one that's got an axe to grind and will come up with some really ridiculous things. It's hard to address those because they're so off the wall. But even if they didn't see that section in the statistics where you clearly say that you were going to do means and standard error of the means, and they wondered what the error bars mean, we're writing a rebuttal right now where that happened. But you really acknowledge and thank them, and I go overboard. I try to, even if it's kind of a ridiculous thing they want, like quoting their papers, add them to the references, right? Go overboard and make them think that, yes, he is listening to and generally that goes through really easily the next time.
Oh, let me just add one more thing. At the NIH, we really encourage, when I was in the training office, if you were to get critiques or feedback or didn't make it and get the award, to reach out to your program officer, or in this case at BrightFocus, reach out to me in order to get, especially at study sections where you only receive the written feedback, but sometimes program officers can kind of give context to specific critiques that were discussed in the actual meeting. And so I think getting information from your program officer or from whoever your research administrator is really important to get kind of the context behind maybe some of the critiques if they can give it. And then number two, it's another fresh face to see your critiques and your project.
And take advantage of them being at, say, a fast track or a Glaucoma meeting.
So I'm going to actually ask a follow-up to that, because all of you, or many of you, have been reviewers. So do you think like you're infallible, or have you maybe asked what the error bars are when somebody wrote it? And so what are some of the perspective of a reviewer and some of the, like what that position is like, that may lead to someone feeling like your review isn't great?
Well, one thing as both a grant reviewer and a reviewer for various journals, turns me off right away is if they try to argue, right? So you think you've made a valid point, and they get so upset that they try to justify their own viewpoint. So even though I spend a lot of time and effort trying to give them suggestions to improve their grant or manuscript, oh man, if they argue back, and I mean, 1 or 2 points, that's okay, but every one of the points, that's kiss of death as far as I'm concerned.
So yeah, being a reviewer is a difficult task, and I feel every time that I have to review either a manuscript or a grant, I feel a great deal of responsibility because we are playing with people's lives, right? So I take it very seriously, and I try to be as objective as I can and very detailed, and spend the time that most of the time to the best I can to do a very fair review. Obviously, sometimes you make mistakes, and then they come back, well, this was a mistake, and you have to also acknowledge that as a reviewer. But being on the other side is the same thing. I don't like reviewers to be unpolite or unfair with me. I try to do the same thing when I am in the other position.
I think that's perfect.
I mean, if I can just add on here, because I was on study section before you, Paloma, and we've kind of all followed each other. But I mean, the goal of a reviewer, and I guess this is the way I always feel, and granted rejection's not great, but as a reviewer, I've always felt like I wanted to try to help make either the grant or the paper or whatever better. Yeah. And that's where my comments would be coming from, and that's where I think you guys are probably the exact same way. You're seeing something that's just not right, and you're trying to clarify it. And so you've got to, even though you get that rejection letter, I think you've got to look at it from the other side too, and understand that they're trying to make it better. So if you're mad at them because they didn't understand, but in the end, it's probably you, the writer, that somehow wrote it in a way that they couldn't understand it. And you've got to be able to clarify it. So it's easy to get mad at the reviewer, but really, the majority of reviewers, now I can't say everybody, but the majority of reviewers are trying to do their best. It's mainly a volunteer job. They're generally doing it very late at night, but they're trying to make it better. It's not that they're trying to make it worse and they're trying to keep somebody from getting a grant. That's my view, so I don't know how you guys are.
100%, yeah.
I mean, I'm holding the microphone, so I'm going to ask a question right now.
Look, you get priority.
It's a question for everyone. I want to go back to what you were mentioning before about, publications is still our best tool to measure how our work is progressing. But I was wondering if you will have an advice for early career scientists when your publication record is not that impressive. What other assets can you use in your favor to move forward your career?
I came here with the US without any publications from my graduate students because in Spain it's not important to publish, so my PIs in Spain didn't think that it was important to publish. So it is possible to come here and start a postdoc without having any publication and to move forward, to change career, to change fields, and cell biology, no matter where you are. So there are some publications that it not always depends on the student. As a PI, it's very difficult. One of the challenges is to assign projects. And a priori, you don't know which projects are going to work, which projects are not going to work. So there are some projects that unfortunately are not as expected, and the student, the trainee, does not reach the level of impact factor or the publication that it is expected at the beginning. But I think there are still opportunities because ophthalmology is not a very highly competitive as it can be, for example, cancer. So you can move further than publications. You can start creating grants. You can come to the meetings and you can talk to the people in the meetings, in your posters, and you can show other people around you in the networking that you are indeed a very good scientist, a much better scientist that perhaps that publication reflects. So there are ways to do it. Just go out, talk to people, start submitting grants, mingle. Yeah, there are ways to do it. And especially come prepared to the meetings. Be there. One of the things that I say to my trainees, please, and lately I'm seeing that when I was in our BrightFocus, all the trainees lately are presenting for posters. No, come here, give a talk. Don't just say posters only. Come here, give a talk, and face the question and answer. And there is what you show really what you are.
And I agree that presenting at meetings, whether it's posters or platform sessions, you'll get feedback, usually, that will actually benefit your writing of the publication. So this is an opportunity to get that feedback before you get the letter back from reviewers. So I do that. And if you're struggling with publications, try and be a co-author on other publications from the lab or somebody that your lab is collaborating with. So I always encourage our students to not only really try for the 2 first author publications, but try and get on as many other publications. And I don't mean gratuitously, but contribute something that will qualify you as an author. And that really also builds camaraderie. It also allows you to learn something in a little bit different field.
I think the thing that I would emphasize is that aside from publications, you are learning so much about how to run a lab. I mean, you have so many marketable skills, all of you, so many marketable skills independent of publishing. You know, if you train grad students, you've managed teams. You work on projects, you're a project manager. You've managed budgets. If you volunteer for your grad school, your postdoc, your medical students associations, you've held leadership positions. Diane, was it you who said you treat it like you're the CEO of your own little company? I think it was you who said that to me. Yeah, you're like a CEO. Yeah, it's like your startup. And everything turns into a translatable skill. You know, your ability to, maybe it's not writing, maybe it's verbal communication. You know, your ability to translate really complex scientific messages into something that can be understood. All of those things can go into skills as a resume. It doesn't necessarily have to mean publications. But to the publication point, and more to Abe's point, I mean, I think it's really important to not just focus on the number of publications, but if you know every step that went into this paper and how exactly that experiment was done, like to the point that you know exactly where you got your antibodies from or whatever, that's going to be something that shows your level of expertise. Because the opposite end of the spectrum is if you're on so many papers, but you can't really talk about what that topic even was or what mouse model that was, then that takes away some credibility. But if you know every single thing about how that study was done, that gives you a lot of credibility. But don't just focus on papers. You have a lot of other things that you bring to the table and bring to a resume.
Yeah, and just to briefly add on to that, so we're just basically talking about the intangible aspects of your holistic person as a scientist. And I think the last thing to add on is just your general passion for the science. I think all of us here and everyone here just is really passionate about figuring out glaucoma, all the mechanisms, fighting the disease. And so if you really display that passion to different scientists at your poster presentation or your talk, they'll really notice you because that's something that is really palpable throughout the audience.
I think over here first. Yep. Yeah. Unless Brad had something to add to what was currently being discussed, I was gonna.
No, it was a new question.
Okay, I have
Related,
a new.
but a new.
I have a new question too.
Yeah.
So, a lot of us are trainees in here. Be you a graduate student or a postdoc, and so we're writing grants, and a lot of that grant, and I've been told many times, when you're writing a grant that's for a trainee fellowship, one of the most important parts is the training plan. So your science, it should be solid. Hopefully all of our science is solid. But the training plan often gets criticized. And so my question to you guys is, how do you make yourself stand out? How do you what are you looking for in a training plan in this field, or again, makes you stand out? I know that I've written training plans that have got similar to what has gotten funded. You read someone else's training plan and you try to kind of mimic that, but also make it your own still, and still it gets kind of critiqued when it didn't for someone else. So how do you kind of balance those kinds of things? Ooh, Jimmy, that might be your question.
So I have reviewed a number of K grants, so I kind of know what they're looking for. The science is part of it, although it's not the major part. So make sure you have a sound hypothesis and sound scientific approach. But the emphasis is on the training part, and so I would be as specific as possible. This is where a lot of the training grants get criticized initially. Don't just say you're going to learn this technique from somebody, but you got to be specific. I'm going to spend 2 hours a week with this individual. This is what we're going to do, and be really specific about what the training is going to accomplish. And also, if your school has compliance training, things like that, put that in as part of your training. So they can see a really strong program for training, and it's not kind of wishy-washy. Those are where most of the training grants that I've been involved with reviewing get into trouble. Can you be over-ambitious with your training? Yes, you can, but in my view, almost all the ones that I have, it's under-ambitious. You've got to be realistic and say that, yeah, I've got to have time for the science, but I'm not going to be training for 40 hours a week. But, yeah, so, John, did you have a comment on that? No? Okay.
I think you're absolutely right, but one more component of the training plan is the letters of support from mentors.
Yeah, let's get a microphone to you.
That's fine.
Yeah.
You can repeat it, but I think the letters of support have to specifically address components of the training plan, really be tailored to that individual.
Yeah, I was going to say that in many instances, the trainee training plan and the PI training plan are different.
Yes.
They don't match, and this is very important. It has to be very detailed. They have to match. And then the training plan has to match the objectives of the grants. And I have seen training plan with objectives that do not support any of the are not required for the application and not required for the specific aims. So details, everything has to match, and what you learn has to be specific for the project that you are trying to develop. Those are the more important things.
Yeah, everything that Paloma and Abe said is and John is spot on. I think a lot of training grants that we award and we see going through when I was at the NIH, they lack the detail that is needed for because it's all about these are training, you're still learning. This is not a finished product grant, an R grant. It's a training grant. So you're still I need to develop X, Y, and Z techniques in order to study this particular thing in glaucoma. And so you need to be very intentional about it. So hey, I'm gonna go to Dr. Linton's lab to learn this certain technique, or I'm gonna go take a course to learn about something else, another aspect of glaucoma. And so having those details, especially in your training plan, very outlined, typically I see the best ones have a very detailed table that outlines year one, it's going to be a certain percentage of research and a certain percentage of specific trainings. And then it gets modulated over the course of time. And so, and I think reviewers see that if you put the level of effort in your training plan as much as you did for your research plan, they'll know that, wow, this person is actually extremely serious about having a long academic career. And then again, just reiterating, and this is another very important point, is the letters of support.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen so many times where the letters are extremely generic, and when we read them, we're this just seems like a recycled letter of support that anyone could have written. And so you really need to bug your mentor about, hey, this is my, and in terms of just alignment of everything, tell them, hey, this is my training plan. I'm going to do X, Y, Z in order to become at this certain point for my K grant or my F grant. And so having them aligned will help them write their letter of support better. And then when you talk to your collaborators or other letters of support, you should also have a meeting with them to discuss what your plans are. It's really involved. It's a lot of things that are extracurricular from your actual research, but in order to be successful for your grant, you have to do these types of things in order to be successful.
I want to follow up of a word that Jimmy mentioned, effort, and it just not apply to the training grant, but the overall application. If the reviewer perceives that you haven't put any effort or thought, the reviewer starts to question whether, the whole application, if you don't put the effort in a grant application, are you really put that effort when you want to pursue the work? So this is one of the major flags that happens in a grant, is when you perceive that, well, this is very sloppy, there is no effort here, everything is very rash. And this is one of the major flags, and as a reviewer is when you start to look for this detail, you don't start with you don't have a good start in the grant.
And just one more hint, because a lot of times you're getting letters of support from very busy individuals. Draft the letter of support.
Yeah.
Give it to them, allow them to then put in their verbiage and whatnot, but that way it includes everything that you need. Already mentioned, don't leave it up to them to guess, right? So unless they're really going to be insulted by you doing that, a lot of more effort on your part, and I know it's awkward to write your own letter of support, but I think that would help.
So I'm actually going to add to that. I think it kind of goes back to Bree's talk yesterday. Actually, to tell the people the help that you need, tell them what you want from them. Even if you don't feel comfortable drafting a whole letter, if you say, I'm asking you for a letter to address these aspects of my training plan, and 1, 2, 3, and here's what I'll be doing in 1, 2, 3, right? Then they know, okay, I can say whatever wonderful things I want about this person, but I also will make sure that I make these statements, right? Yeah. Brad.
So 2 quick points to preface my question. One is that I think it's probably fair to say there are a lot of changes afoot in biomedical research and how it's funded. One, though, that's interesting is the new scoring system at NIH for different, sort of rearranged criteria, de-emphasize, in some ways, publication record as a general thing. And then the other quick point is another change I've noticed when I was a graduate student over 30 years ago. IOBS was the journal to be in from my perspective. And now, people really like to publish in very quote-unquote high impact journals that maybe your audience is broader, but maybe it's a little more difficult to target the people in your specific field, whether it's TM or laminar cribrosa or whatever it's going to be. So people have to search around a little more to find it. Okay, so my point though, I've served on study sections where this conversation has happened more than once, where one grant had a paper in Science, and one reviewer said about their productivity, they only had one paper. And then another grant had like 20 papers, and a different reviewer said, they had 20 papers, but they were all in IBS. So where does the person publish? Where should we target?
Okay, so my last review, one of the reviewers, my last grant, one of the reviewers said it was a renewal. Dr. Liton Paloma was very productive. The other reviewer said she was not productive. When I review grants, I look at the science, not at the publications. Obviously, there might be a very nice science manuscript, but perhaps the science, when you look into details that is reviewed by a person that really is from the field, looks details that other reviewers in science didn't see it. So the fact that you have a science manuscript doesn't mean that the science is rigorous or is significant, and perhaps you have one IOBS paper that is much more important for the field than the one published in science. So when I review grants, obviously you look at the publications and the productivity, but the productivity for me is more like if we are giving funding to this person, right, is gonna do something. It's not about the impact factor of the number of manuscripts that you do. I look more at the quality, at the rigorous of science.
And some of the science and nature papers, at least are small, right? They don't have a lot of detail unless you go back into the weeds where you deposit supplementary data. Some papers in Cell, for example, are 5 papers in one. So I kind of view it as not the impact factor, but the amount of material that's being presented, number one. And most of these papers are huge collaborations between multiple labs. They have 30 authors on them. And so how do you kind of say, okay, what was the contribution of this individual that's applying for the grant versus a first author IOBS paper where that individual was, or senior author?
I think it depends on how ambitious the student is, right? So you might be the type of person that wants to publish a science paper and you don't care about being 5 years, 6 years as a graduate student, or you might want to move to the next step. What I could say is that it's not required to have a science paper or a nature paper to move on, so you can do it perfectly with an experimental research or an IOBS paper, so you don't need to have one high impact journal paper manuscript, is my point.
Can I ask a follow-up? So can someone just explain the impact in their biosketch? You know how there's room for each paper to explain the significance?
Well, so I'm actually going to answer it because I was going to follow up and say that in part that comment I think is good for the faculty too and gets back to the letter of support because it's really the mentor's letter. It's their responsibility to indicate what the impact is of the publications and the work of the student. And that can be done even, if it's even a year old, be like the citation index is already this. right? And so, and I think I'll follow up on Paloma's too about it's really well, do you want your work cited, or do you want to say you have a science or nature paper? And maybe your science or nature paper is cited all the time by people in your field, but maybe it's not. And I don't know, from a networking perspective, I feel like people will know you better if they're reading your work. So I think it's sometimes hard.
Yeah. And I think in order to get into these high impact journals, the editors are going, well, how generalizable is this to our audience, right? And so if you're working on a specific aspect of the trabecular meshwork, that's going to be tough to get into a science paper, right? So you got to take all those factors in, and you know, you shoot for the higher impact, but be ready for a rejection just from the editorial board. They may not even send it out for review because they don't think it's relevant to the audience of that journal.
Hello. So as a junior person aiming to understand the process of writing grants and applying for funding a little bit better, I'm hearing what feel like two different camps of advice. And one is more the academic ideal, where you have this idea and it addresses a question that you feel like is really important and you want to do that science. And then the other is, these are the funding, this is the funding available, and these are the themes that they're interested in. And so it's best to tailor your scientific questions to what's available. And I guess the ideal is it does both at the same time. But I'm curious if you recommend kind of erring on one side or erring on the other, or if you read grant applications that feel like, I know what this person's trying to do, and they're just kind of putting a coat of paint on it to make it fit this particular theme. Yeah, where would you recommend kind of falling on that academic ideal, or this is what's the focus?
I think given the current funding environment, I do both, really. And we're all passionate about our science and really believe in what we're doing. And so I don't want anybody to give up that dream, right? So keep trying that, but then the practical comes as maybe that's not going to get funded right away. So then you're going to have to try and tailor it to match whatever funding agency. And we didn't talk about foundation funding, which is huge opportunities, especially BrightFocus. But I mean, there's the Glaucoma Research Foundation, there's the Glaucoma Foundation, the Fight for Sight. I mean, there's a lot of foundations out there, and they're going to be playing a much greater role in supporting some of the research that we're not going to get supported from the NIH.
I know it's really hard because my other hat I wear is I work with a program manager at the Advanced Projects Research Agency for Health, or ARPA-H. And one of the things that we have had to do this year is modify the scope, just like you're saying, modify the scope of our programs to fit more of the secretary's agenda. And I was telling Colleen last night that every time I have to say the words MAHA agenda, I feel my soul dying a little bit inside, but the goal is to get the good science funded. You can still find a way to get your good work in, get the work that you're passionate about in. But if you have to wrap it a little bit differently, at least for now, to get your foot in the door and get yourself going, then that's okay too. You know, as long as the work gets funded and the good work can continue.
So I'm going to ask a quick follow-up in the 4 minutes, just because I think it's important for everyone. Can you talk about how you identify as a trainee? How do you identify where to find funding, right? I mean, so we're talking about matching of funding, but how do you find funding and look at eligibility, and what are things to consider?
So the first is eligibility, and this is very different if you are U.S. citizens, permanent resident, or you are a non-U.S. citizens and you cannot apply. If you are a U.S. citizen and you are a permanent resident and you are in a postdoc position, then you can apply for a T32. If you are not, you cannot apply for any NIH funding at the beginning. So One of the things that I would advise everyone is to start writing grant as soon as you enter the lab. Even when you are writing an experiment, look at an experiment like in a small grant proposal. You have your title, you have your objectives, materials and methods, results, conclusions. Manuscripts is the same as a grant. So start looking at grants and experiments, start writing grants ASAP, look for institutional grants, foundation grants, and if you are in the year 3 or 4, K99 is one of the grants that will push you towards the academic career, but start looking for any opportunities. There are grants around, no matter whether you are in graduate student, postdoc, national foreign, you can apply always for any grant that is out there. Just reach out to BrightFocus, Glaucoma Research Foundations, Glaucoma Foundations, institutions, fundraising. I wrote grants that were $500 for a family that were donated money for the eye center. The idea is that you start writing a grant because when the moment is there, when you have to write your first NIH grant, you know how to do it.
I mean, I had in grad school, my mentor used to say, money is green no matter where it comes from. We worked with, no, and I'm serious, we worked with a guy in a lab down the hall that got a grant from the PepsiCo. I'm not sure what he wrote about. He was an immunologist, but somehow he got money from Pepsi. I applied for grants from L'Oreal, posing glaucoma as a women's health problem. I tried the American Heart Association, a grant about ocular hypertension and the parallels between systemic hypertension and ocular hypertension on a biochemical basis. I mean, if you think about outside just glaucoma funds, I mean, aging, any sort of private funds, there's a lot of benefactors out there that have glaucoma funds because maybe there's a genetic component in their family and they're interested in the genetic components of glaucoma. And I know there's a lot of people in this room that are interested in that. There's ways to find it, just be creative, and again, like I was telling you, if you have to package it up a little bit differently, that's okay. The work is still going to get done.
Yeah. And I'll just mention that several postdocs, previous postdocs in my lab, Knights Templar Foundation, and that they're very interested in pediatric diseases. And if you can somehow tie your model or the pathophysiology that you're studying is relevant to pediatric glaucoma, for example, that's another. So be really thorough in looking, and there are some websites out there, I can't think of right offhand what they are, but it just covers funding opportunities. I'm sorry?
Pivot.
Oh, yeah, Lion's Eye.
But yeah, start writing grants as soon as possible.
Okay, so one more, you think?
Yeah, I think one more. Go ahead. Yeah, since I cut you off for sure. Okay.
No, you didn't cut me off. Actually, I wanted to extend your question to you and the panel and to Susanna. As a reviewer for multiple foundations, and we began targeting, and we talked about putting in the work. You're not repackaging your project. You're putting in the work to try to understand what that foundation really is what their priorities are, right? And you need to understand what they're looking for. If it's Glaucoma Foundation, the name's there, right? But when you're looking at the foundations, try to understand what they really want, the problems that they really want addressed. Don't just repackage, because the reviewers will see right through that, because they've got a ton of grants, and there's going to be a pile that's repackaged, and there's going to be a pile that's really targeted for that particular foundation, and they stand out. It's pretty obvious, right? So think about how your work really put in the effort to think about how it really applies to what they're looking for, right? And talk to people. These guys are great resources. Talk to them about what that particular foundation might be looking for. That really stands out when you've just trying to paint it over with a make it look like it's something, but it isn't, right?
I have one quick question to the faculty that are in there, or anybody really in the room that has had grant money. Like, how many have applied for and accepted grant money like under $1,000 at any point in your career? Right? Yeah. I mean, so these are for grad students and things in particular, right? It's something like write the grant and then send it. American Federation for Aging, I think, was my first one. It was $500. But I bought an ELISA kit, and it was my ELISA kit.
My first one is because I asked for an increase in salary to my chair, and he told me, those of you who knew David Epstein, he was always saying there is no free lunch. So he told me, write a grant, and then I will give you an increase in salary. So yeah, I wrote a grant.
But don't think you have to start big, I think, is Paloma's point, right?
Yeah.
Like, just write it.
Right.
It doesn't have to be the K99R00.
Yep.
Right.
Exactly.
Don't turn down invitations to be a reviewer as well.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. That's a good
By the way, now that I am here, if you're interested to review for experimental eye research, please send me an email.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you to our panel. You guys are amazing.